This would be a great advisory board.
Oh, you're over there.
She's a busy the armor board. But no, she's not.
Just make space.
Even the ad agency folks behind us. I don't know.
Mic check, 1, 2.
Just that David. So we're going to do most of the altar on Friday before, and then on Sunday. Well, you can always edit it.
I'm looking. What, that one? Yeah. Yeah, I haven't done this one yet. This was originally just all the beads. Or chain rather. I was going to do the chain first. And then do matching What? Exactly.
Got it. Okay. You got it. Good evening, guys. We're going to get started. Thanks for coming out. This is the first of 13 events here this week as part of Innovate Pasadena's Connect Week. Get ready. It's all starting. I'm with Cross Campus. We're a network of collaborative workspaces. We're based throughout the Southern California region. This is our second campus here. We're opening up downtown at the start of next year. And we just did our first sort of teaser event there last Friday, Silicon Beach Fest, and now we're packing this week. It's going to be amazing. Our members saying something to all these things, and it's great. As I said, we're a shared workspace environment. We also layer on a bunch of really value-added programming. Some things are like this, these really exciting public events. Sometimes it's really just skills-based workshop and kind of one-on-one mentorship. If you'd like to learn more, we're doing a promotion actually. If you sign up for a tour today, we're going to give you a complimentary espresso beverage at our cafe and also a free day pass to work out of the space. So please talk to me. My name's Ben Snyder. You can also speak to Dan, Becky, or Alan, any of us in the cross-campus blue shirts. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Jim from Innovate Pasadena.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. This is one of these multi-layer introduction things where the introductions will keep going for a long time, but then eventually we'll get to the actual program. My name is Jim McCarthy. I am the CEO and co-founder of Goldstar, which is a Pasadena technology company that's been around for quite a few years, and we have a big office on Lake Avenue, and we're very proud to be a Pasadena tech company. But I'm also a member of the board of Innovate Pasadena, and so I'm here in that capacity to thank you for coming to this event, Get Art Out of Technology, which is one of 40 events that are part of Connect Week this week here in Pasadena on 4 different tracks, science, technology, entrepreneurship, and design. So it's kind of like TED, except it's more like STED. And the E stands for something slightly different. But nevertheless, those 4 tracks, this of course is on the design track. I've been working in the Pasadena technology community for more than 15 years, and what I love about what Innovate Pasadena is doing is that it's really bringing together all the people that are doing great technology and entrepreneurship and design work in the city of Pasadena in a way that they get to know each other, they get to leverage each other's knowledge, they don't feel quite as isolated. There was a time, I would say 5 or 10 years ago, when a lot of great stuff was going on, but all the attention was being paid to Santa Monica and other parts of Southern California when, in fact, so much good stuff was and is going on here. And this organization, the reason I joined the board is because I feel so excited by what the organization's been able to do. This week, like I said, there are 40 innovation-inspired and mostly free programs. I think what that means is most of them are free, not that the events are mostly free. I think most of them are entirely free, is what that means. Presentations, parties, I think there's 1 or 2 combat-based events. That's not true. The theme is level up because the idea is to improve your knowledge, improve your network, and all the pieces of the puzzle that go into being successful in our business. I thought it was kind of cool that there's a thing called the Epic Failures competition happening this week in Connect Week, because you can't have good progress in the tech world without epic failures. Those are often the best kind. So this is one of, I think, 2 events that are happening here this evening. The one that follows is at 7. It's on a different track, but still worthwhile. And so, again, thank you for coming on behalf of the Innovate Pasadena board. I would now like to introduce Mike from Echo Factory. I told you there were layers of introductions. So, Mike.
Save the best for last. Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Mike Schaefer. I'm the CEO of Echo Factory. We're a local Pasadena advertising agency. We actually just moved here almost exactly 1 year ago. September, we moved to Pasadena. We moved our whole headquarters here. We're very happy to be here. And in the spirit of Connect Week and connecting, we put this event together to bring some of our friends. So we got our friends from Red Camera, our friends from Ableton, Kadenze, and we also brought some sponsors in and met some new people along the way. So we have Arts Ray is here. Marshall helped us put this together. We have the Armory for the Arts. Cross Campus, thank you so much. We have some very good friends here at Cross Campus. And so we're really proud to be part of this community. So I'd like to just say thank you for coming and introduce Jordan, who's going to be moderating our event today, Getting Art Out of Technology. Jordan, if you can come up, please give Jordan a round of applause. All right.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I just want to say thanks one more time to all the sponsors, to the Armory and Innovate Pasadena and Arts Ray and Cross Campus for putting this all together and giving us a venue to start talking about a little bit more in depth about the role of art and technology. So my name is Jordan Hochenbaum, and I'm a co-founder at Kadenze, VP of Engineering, where we're building an online platform for really bringing together some of the world's best arts universities and also artists and engineers to bring world-class education online for free and also at scale. So one of the other things that we're also doing, in addition to trying to put all this great content up online for free, is come up with interesting new models for lowering the cost of education, which we all know has just gone kind of out of control, especially in the States. And to that effect, I'm also a professor of music technology and digital media at CalArts, where I teach a wide array of things from computer science and programming, generative art and design, and also music production. And yeah, at CalArts, I'm lucky that I get to work face-to-face with some really bright students. So the title of the discussion today is Get Art Out of Technology, which is certainly a controversial title because, in my opinion, art has always been at the forefront of technology and vice versa since its inception. You know, whether or not whether we're talking about paints and mixing pigments and the invention of the paintbrush, or stage technologies and story mechanisms in Greek theater, to the engineers and mathematicians that also worked as artists. So we all know probably Da Vinci is the quintessential example of the Renaissance man and the archetype for the polymath. But there's even other people. Alfred Hitchcock was also an engineer, and there's lots of stories about how he used to draw out these elaborate plans that would help him figure out how to actually make his artistic visions a realization. And that was all by using his engineering focus and engineering know-how. So there are a lot of examples of people in history and also today that are doing this and are asking these questions all the times. And many of them aren't engineers. A lot of times they're not creating tools, but using tools, and have benefited from the technology and the advances in technology to allow them to move forward. So the line between art and technology has always been a controversial one that's stirred up a lot of debate on both sides of it. And there's a lot of questions that emerge from the boundaries there between art and technology. If somehow technology and automation and all these things can supplant and change the way we actually make art, and perhaps it already is doing that. So to start answering these questions, I want to introduce our panelists that are going to be sort of talking about this through their experience. So to get us started, I want to introduce Tony McCall, so if you want to come up here. There you are. So Tony is the managing director, North American director for Ableton Live, who many of you know is a company that makes some really innovative music software, and also Ableton, they make Live as music software. They also make some really interesting hardware for allowing musicians or composers to perform, write, and compose music. Tony, also you're a musician for a number of years, and I know you've been involved in a number of really crucial companies in the audio industry, like M-Audio and Avid and some other companies there. So please welcome Tony. Next, I want to introduce Cleigh Reed. And Cleigh's a photographer and cinematographer who works over at Red, which is a company that's been at the forefront of digital cinematography and photography, and really kind of giving the 35mm camera, I guess, a run for its money with making 4K resolution cameras sort of something that's attainable and something that we can use in our practice. And lastly, I want to bring up Dia Goldsmith, who's the co-founder and chief creative officer over at Echo Factory, which is a Pasadena-based advertising agency that's deeply invested in developing market strategy for launching brands. And I think you have over 20 years of experience there, so yeah, we're really excited, and I'm super personally excited to get your thoughts on sort of this intersection of art and technology. So welcome, Dia. So the big question that I guess was sort of on the prompt when we first started talking about this is this larger question of, is this art? And I just wanted to start with a short anecdote. I can remember when I was a kid in Chicago, I used to go with my parents to the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry. And it's this amazing place. If you ever make it to Chicago, you don't have to be a kid to enjoy it there. But I remember I used to go and I would see these exhibitions there, and it was very clear to me that the role and the purpose of these exhibitions was not art. It was to teach about some sort of process or some technology, and it was a very different thing than walking into art gallery space. Even though coincidentally, I think the location where they built the Museum of Science and Industry was actually used as an art space during the World Fair in Chicago, and I think that was in the late 1893 or 94. And but it was always something that I was really interested in. I started asking myself when I would go there, because I would see these beautiful things that would take your voice and carry it around the room, and I would ask myself, is this art, and why is it different than staring at a painting or experiencing some other type of interactive piece? And this question, is it art, I know as we were talking, is something that comes up a lot in creative advertising and marketing, where we're working in a more of a commercial domain, we get to ask ourselves, are we truly creating something that is art? And I think as long as technology and art have been intertwined, it's something that we need to ask, and that we're almost forced to investigate. So I guess my first question for you all up here is, what is different today about technology, and what does that than in the past, let's say 30 years ago, and why is that interesting, or why is that important to recognize as an artist or somebody working in this domain?
I think access and democratization of technologies has really greatly influenced, at least myself, in creating art. And I think that it can't be overvalued just how much creativity and ingenuity is in technology, and how much they're constantly pushing the forefront of these things. Like this camera right here can shoot 6K. It started out from the idea that 1080 wasn't enough, that 4K was something that we wanted to pursue. And that really wasn't that long ago when we really think about it. And now an iPhone with 4K shooting capabilities is out. And it really, in my mind, kind of opens up the doors to enabling creativity and bringing some of the things that were tools that higher-end creators only had access to, down to a level where people who have artistic passion can actually influence this technology and influence the creative industry around this technology. Myself, I'm not a super technical person, honestly. I started off with a passion for photography and assisting a photographer, Mike, actually. And really, for me, once I started at Red, I kind of had to become a technophile. It was kind of part of the corporate environment there, part of the family that is Red, is about really digging into the technical knowledge behind our cameras. So for me, I kind of went about it the opposite way. I'm a super creative person that had to think as a technical person, and that kind of opened my eyes up to the fact that technology is just art in a different form. I mean, anything, in my opinion, art is just human creativity put into action, And so technology always has the ability to enhance that.
Do you feel that nobody ever picked up a violin and got a clean tone out of the violin? There's a certain level or entry or barrier there to get something beautiful out of probably any real meaningful instrument that at least in music, that you learn. So, people spend their entire lives, and I think for the first 10 years, before you can really build up a little bit of dexterity and nuance in that sort of interface. Do you feel that there is a challenge there with how we design our technology and the tools, right? Like you said, anybody can take out, I just got the iPhone 6s recently, and it shoots 4K. So I can literally hold this up in front of something, and the pure quality of it will be beautiful. I don't have to set any parameters. I don't have to, I have to hold it up in front of something and come up with some sort of composition. But then there's so much that we can do very quickly after the fact that kind of removes that from there. So is that a problem, or is that, that sort of level of accessibility, is that more is that, what are the challenges there?
I mean, I think that with that, it gives you this ability to achieve these things that you want to achieve, but what you want to achieve is actually hard. So making art is hard, making music is hard, making films is hard, and there's a lot of time and energy that you really have to put into it to master it. And I know just from the experience within the world of music, where you'll see people will knock somebody maybe that creates everything inside the box, and they actually don't touch anything except for the QWERTY keyboard. That well, it's like a computer program, but that's hard to do that and to come up with something musical. And it wasn't just that they walked out one day and mastered it. So, but I do think what it does is it at least gives you the opportunity. It's along the lines of the democratization. So many things that artists can do now, and specifically, I don't shoot film, thank God. But the thing that for what musicians can do, the fact that you could go out and you could create a really compelling performance, stage show, and do that pretty much on your own, maybe with a couple other of your bandmates or fellow artists, musicians. That's pretty amazing. So I think that's
Yeah, I think I would pile on to that in terms of the visual arts. I graduated, I'm going to date myself now. So I graduated from school just about the time that computers were being introduced. And so within a matter of 6 months, my degree was sort of obsolete already. I'm traditionally or classically trained designer illustrator, which means, to me, it means pre-computer. And so I was still hand lettering type above 40 point, for my portfolio. And along came computers, and I had my mom is a fine artist, and I remember when I was in school, and this is, mind you, this is pre-computer, and I was doing an illustration class, and I was working in pencil, and I took this illustration that I was working on, and I showed it to my mom and a couple of her friends, and they were like, wow, that's really slick. And they were using sort of these kind of buzzwords that I associate with advertising art as opposed to fine art. And I remember thinking to I was a little bit crushed, but I also remember thinking to myself, I probably had no less than 200 hours in that, and it was going to be used, in an advertisement, but my dedication to the craft and to art was such that that's what that project demanded. And now I think about hand lettering that headline, and there are times that I still choose, and I have designers, really talented designers and illustrators that I work with that still choose to do things by hand, but they're choosing it, and it allows them to focus on that thing that's gonna make the piece amazing. And we use technology now to sort of streamline all that other distraction. So if it's, getting a great photo, we use technology, the best technology we can find to take the best photo. And yes, we're using technology, and then we might even take that and manipulate it in a computer program. And yes, that's technology, but the end result is sort of very inspired, and it lets us pick and choose the things that we're deciding to apply that craft to. So I think in that way, and also to speak to the democratization part, like I think that the best artists out there and the best creatives out there are looking for that challenge, and it's fantastic to have, you know, kids out there creating art that's, you know, will rival what I can do. It just ups my game, and it gives me, and I guess stepping away from the designer part of me and focusing as the creative officer at an advertising agency, like I'm interested in having access to all that amazing creativity, and the brands that I work for, they're the new patrons of the arts, and they're not dictating create this. They're going out and associating themselves with art, great art that already exists out there, and that's a huge opportunity, I think, for all of us. And technology is sort of what's allowing that to happen, I think.
So I think the general consensus that I'm getting up here is that technology can definitely kind of bridge that gap between amateur and professional, but to really do something meaningful, or not to necessarily meaningful in the experience that the person doing it has, but to create true works of art, there is a certain level of investment that even if the technology is simplifying process and can make certain aspects easier, you still need to, there's still that other element that you need to put into it as an artist to make it something that's unique or that's meaningful to a greater audience.
I think that's you. I feel like you have to put a little bit of yourself in everything, kind of like blood in the bakery goods. It's I mean the idea that that everything, if it's a true work of art from you, then it's gonna bear some mark of you. It's something that you created. And that's personally one of my favorite things to do in the world is create things. They don't have to be special things, and sometimes I use technology and sometimes I don't, but I think the more important part is that it's an expression, and even an advertisement is an expression. It's a calculated expression, and it's an expression that maybe has an element of honesty or dishonesty or any of those things. It's still an expressive communication, and the fact that someone put creative thought behind that only strengthens those things, I think. And then technology is this medium that we use, but that doesn't change the fact in my mind that all of this is perspective based. It's all putting a touch of what you see into the minds of people around you.
So another thing that I'm really interested in getting your thoughts on is sort of this obsession, I think, that we see with this idea of the analog and sort of the old, like the way things used to be. So, Instagram, for example, is largely popular and successful based on the fact that once you take that picture and it's already through this square Instagram viewport, which is very different than the movies that we see when we go to the theater, and our laptop screens, which is already another aspect ratio. But then there's this other element where, I'm going to make it look like my old toy camera with light leak, or I'm going to color it in a way that it feels like it's from the 70s or has this sort of nostalgic sort of quality to it. And you don't just see it on Instagram, and you see it working a lot in music. Every week it's like some software, some audio effect or plugin comes out that's emulating some noisy, kind of crappy piece of gear from 30 years ago, or cassette tapes are really popular again. Sort of, they're really hip to release your music on cassette, even though cassette is probably one of the lossiest formats. Everybody complains about MP3s, and then they're now putting their music out, on a limited run of 40 cassette tapes that are rolling off all the high frequencies and adding all kinds of crazy harmonic distortion. So I'm interested in knowing how a company like Ableton or Red, or when you're working with clients, how you sort of negotiate this desire to move things forward while at the same time bring things back. I don't know if it's because it's like this nostalgic thing or or why not. But yeah, I'm interested in your thoughts there.
I think is to not, for us at least, is not to have this closed ecosystem where it's only inside the box. It's all digital. It's that's you want to work with these new technologies, and that we do embrace things that come from the analog world. I think the funny thing, and I'm partially a victim of this, is I'll find myself going up on eBay and lusting after this synth from 20, 30 years ago, buying it, then having another epiphany, going back up and selling it, and doing this multiple times over and over again. And I keep asking myself, why do I do this? And I think it's sort of like, I try to think of an analogy. It's like when you have a pair of house shoes that you wear for a really long time and they feel so comfortable that finally somebody makes you throw them away. You get a new pair that should be exact same brand. They just don't feel the same. And I think it's the imperfection, the nostalgia that you get used to something. And so I think as far as in the environment that you create in, if as it relates to music, the best thing to do is to embrace that. And one is not better than the other. They're just different. And if that's you're trying to create a mood or a textural sound, something like that, then if you need to go buy a synth on eBay and then sell it and buy it again, then so be it.
I think it's interesting. I think one of the reasons I enjoy teaching is because I feel like I have this direct line into what's happening between 18 and 26 all the time. And I can think even just 4 years ago, I teach one class which is a live electronic music performance class. And about 4 years ago, everybody had a laptop and a controller, and they're all learning how to design their own musical controllers to control their laptop. And everybody was very much in this space where they had their screen and their controller, and they're trying to get away from the screen via the controller. And then this flip happened maybe about 2 years ago, where that same class was filled with basically old vintage synths. So everybody, they were tired of the laptop, and now they were all, everybody just wanted some old drum machine from 1980, 84, one of the first drum machines, and to get that sound, because I guess, things come in waves and are back in style, and to get that sound, you could just turn that machine on. But now, this year, it's been very interesting because there's, I think with any technology, there's this moment of overshoot and undershoot, and then you kind of settle back in the ringing. And now it's what tool is right for the job and what achieves that sound and that sort of thing. So
I think one of the, I don't know, this was quite a few years ago. I read this article, and it was a bunch of engineers sitting around discussing the future of the resolution of high resolution audio, and debating 24:192, and they were just going on and on. This one guy stood up and he just said, when you were a teenager and you asked to borrow your father's car and a song came on the radio and you turned it up, why did you turn it up? Was it because the single speaker in your father's dashboard sounded good, or was it because you liked the song? And I thought that was like a moment of wisdom or enlightenment. It's that, whether you use the analog synth or you use the digital, the software and the technology, at the end of the day, it's the outcome is what's the most important, and it really doesn't matter. And sometimes you'll be surprised when, I'd love to see this, when you assume that something was made a certain way and that somebody was using a certain piece of equipment or gear or instrument, and then you find out that it's completely wrong, and it, was, we just went into the built-in audio input on my computer, and it's like, that's how you recorded that, so
Yeah.
I love that, because that's I think that's beautiful.
I kind of agree with that, and I think in our world, in the visual world, like at some degree, stuff is put out there for the world, and it's going through a technological process, whether it's like that it's being printed or it's being put online. And there's like typography is a perfect example. Like there's all this great, like you buy hand-drawn typography fonts, or you buy distressed fonts, and I'm thinking, just squiggle. Just shake a little when you're the pen. It's like, and we could scan that. So we have all the tools that allow us to port that directly into the computer, and really then what it boils down to is sort of what we talked about before. It's the artist, it's the designer, it's the musician, it's them deciding like, look, I want hand looking typography, but I'm not going to spend 40 hours doing that because what I'm interested in is this illustration or this photo or this sound. And like how you get there, the craft is important, and people sense, they smell a rat kind of right away. And so if the quality is there, use your hand, draw it yourself or buy a typography. It does, you know, right? I mean, it's about getting to the end result, and that end result is even different for everyone. So I feel like technology at least has given people that have amazing ideas in their head and maybe not initially the technical skill to get it out, maybe we give them a few extra tools so that we get to enjoy that piece of creativity that we otherwise wouldn't get to enjoy, maybe.
It's interesting. It makes me wonder, and I'm interested in getting your thoughts on what is the current sort of cultural context that's driving art and technology, and how does that impact the technology that's actually used to create it? So what are the motivations between what's next from Ableton, or why do we need to go from the 4K to the 6K to the 10K, and what is the cultural context that's driving that sort of progression today?
Definitely it read like there's an idea that settling. Definitely it read there's this idea that settling is not accepted. That 1080 is not good enough, that 4K is not good enough, until we're pushing the limits of what is visibly discernible and different, until we're pushing the limits of our eyes and the capabilities of our organic structure. I don't think that the people at Red will ever be really satiated, because for us there's this drive where film is amazing, and 70 proof film is really amazing. It's beautiful looking, and it's what a lot of filmmakers still in the higher end of cinema choose to shoot. Christopher Nolan, like Quentin Tarantino, a bunch of these people have made a statement saying that 70 mil perf is what they want. They really want to work in this because it's got so much content, so much detail, and it's just a really beautiful film, and we're getting close to that now with 8K, and I think that once we see that level in digital, it's going to make everyone even hungrier. I mean, it's like, this is what is the top of what's available right now, and people love it. And I think that it's the same thing you were kind of saying, where crank up the volume. Like, I mean, and do we need to make a distinction between whether you like the song or you like, the sound of the song? For me, like, I always want to know more. I always want to see more. If there's a way to capture more information, I want to do that. And I think that for me, technology is my biggest tool, and it can be, a big backpack that I put too much stuff in. I can shoot way too much content and end up with hard drives and hard drives and hard drives. But I'd rather have that there and be able to use my creativity and my lens to go back through that content and to go back through that information and decide what I want people to see. And that's like a big thing for me, especially visually, that I think technology is better than analog in some senses. When you look at logarithmic versus linear, so when we see things with our eyes, the light level jumps by 2. When we see things on a computer, it's by 1. So a computer goes 1 and 0, and our eyes kind of go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and it's these broader jumps to accommodate more light. But linearly, through a computer, there's more finite detail. Every 2 is broken into 1 and 2. And so I think that, technology is the thing that can maybe open us up and bring new things that we can be creative with. And that's like the part for me where I don't think it'll be enough. Like, I don't think you'll ever reach a point where I think there's still value in old techniques. So like, I went to school for graphic design for college, and one of my favorite things to do is physically paint things and then digitize them and use them as backgrounds for things and stuff like that. I think that there's always going to be inherent value in the chaos of a logarithmic or an organic material, but I think that how you harness that chaos and how you present that chaos is really the important part, because we're all looking at things digitally now anyway. You know, most of the content we view is on a screen from our pocket or from our backpack, and outside of that, even many of the cinemas are all digital display, you know, projection. And so it's, to me, it's like, can we take that chaos and distill it and kind of allow some of that to still live in this technology world? And that's the part where it's like, hopefully that'll happen. That's my hope anyway.
Randy, did you have something that you wanted to?
Yes, I guess. I'm not sure if it'll answer the question. The one thing I was just going to say is that I don't know if it's so much that we look at the cultural impact directly. We're like a step removed, because we really spend the majority of our time looking at the community of users and how they use it and what they want. Occasionally there'll be a technology that comes around that somebody has embraced, and they're integrating that. For example, even when we were talking about integrating the analog synths and stuff like that, and there at some point, that became a part of our software, so that you could easily integrate these analog devices into that world. But it really is the focus on the people that are currently using it, and then from that, where do we, what is it that they want to achieve as in their art and their expression, and how can we, either enhance that experience or look at the workflow. That's workflow for us is huge, and it's really about keeping the user in the creative workflow, and so that the software, the technology doesn't impede what they're trying to do.
I guess that is the title, right? Get technology out of art.
Yeah, so that's what.
That's always the tricky thing is once you realize that it's there, all of a sudden the creative process is now, something has now stopped the creative process. So how do you make it as seamless as possible?
And that's the one thing that we really want. We like to see people get things done, so that otherwise you get this technology and you spend all this time either A, trying to figure it out, or B, tweaking, but you never actually finish any kind of. And some people are fine with that, and that's fine. But there's a lot of people that want to get something done, but the technology impedes them. So how can we make it so that it's not? And I think the other thing is that the Gerhard Bayless, who founded our company, he really views himself as an instrument maker. So not as a technology whiz. He looks at we have two products, and he views both products as instruments that we make. And so that's I think that's a different mindset. Instead of saying I'm going to build this technology and add all these features, and what if we could do this and that. And a lot of times we don't do things because there's a lot of things that we choose not to do because they don't serve the creative workflow.
I was just going to say, just really quickly too, I think there's a lot to be said for, the technology is about getting things done, and art is a lot about, that it's more, maybe could be more considered more contemplative and idea driven. But I think the thing that both art and technology have in common is the experience, right? So I think technology drives for, or it pushes for an outcome, and I think in my own head at least, some of that old tension of like, is art for the sake of art, is that getting lost when you start talking about technology? And I think not. I think especially because technology is becoming so ubiquitous that you don't know anymore. I mean, we were kind of talking about this earlier. You don't actually know anymore. I talk to younger people they don't make the distinction. They don't make the distinction between the tools that they're using and what the end result is. So I think culturally, it's just there's a spectrum, and we're on a path where those lines are going to continually be blurred, and the measuring stick is going to be quality. I think, the quality of the creation.
You mentioned something regarding online. It's something I think is really interesting. particularly because how available art is online. You know, you can go on SoundCloud and experience a million pieces of music, or Google has, you know, a digital museum where they're basically collating the collections from hundreds of museums and bringing them all into this digital space that you can just freely explore in a way that you can access it in a way that you've never been able to before. And in fact, when you go to a museum, you only see a very small percentage of their collection, because most of it's you know, in storage someplace. And so I'm wondering how the high availability of art, what that does to our relationship with it, if that impacts it in some way, if that makes it better, or if there are challenges there. And yeah, basically, yeah, in the face of the internet and high availability, what is our relationship to art, and how is that changing?
I guess for me, it makes me hungry for good art. You know, like, and I think that again is sort of going back to, you know, technology. Like, calling yourself an artist doesn't make you an artist, and technology is not going to make you an artist. And I think the best that we can do is harness technology to put artists, true artists, in as many valuable places as we can, you know. And I think, again, you know, from my perspective as the creative director of an agency, like, I know content is the new, you know, thing we talk about, but I look at content and think it's generated in less of a sort of, we're not, brands and agencies are no longer saying, I want you to create this thing. We're looking around and we're seeing what's resonating with people, and we're seeing where our brands want to be, and we're adopting that. And so I feel like there is more of a, and then we're hopefully supporting it, and I feel like that's the sort of new relationship. And I think the online thing, you know, I feel like if you probably got some statistics, the art that people are looking at online is probably still the stuff that we all agree is really good, you know. And there's great ways to filter.
Yeah, I genuinely think that, like, and this may be controversial, but I think that good work and bad work are essentially oil and water. Like, I mean, and it doesn't really matter how much there is of one or the other, they're going to stand apart. I think that, you know, if you know what you're looking for, you know, it's not that hard to pick out good work from bad work. And so, you know, when you look at this overabundance of content on the internet, it's great, I think, because it gives you more perspective of what's there and what you can look for, what you can look at, but it also makes it blaringly obvious when you see something great. I mean, you can see, you know, 10 okay things in a row, and you see one really great piece or one really great photograph, and it sticks with you. And then I don't think that'll change. And I think the availability of content, it will only strengthen that idea that it's almost like a scientific experiment. The more data you have, the more precise your answers are going to be. You know, like it's really that simple in my mind, that the tenets of good work are inexhaustible in a sense, that they'll always be there, and that's like kind of the way that I try to design.
It's just the time though to go through all that.
Very true.
That's the only thing that I will say, that you missed the filters. You know, everybody was like, why does somebody else have to decide what I need to listen to or watch or whatever? And now they're all gone, and it's total.
Like, curate for me.
Yeah, it is. It is
Increased noise floor there that you have to sift through.
Yeah, it's the balance between the two. Just one thing I would add, that and this is, I guess, maybe more particular to music, is that there's this resurgence and rebirth of live music, live performance, and tech, you know, so the pendulum kind of swings back and forth, and there's this point where everyone's like, oh, I can make a CD in my bedroom, or I can, you know, upload my album to this and that, and that, from a commercial perspective, in a lot of ways, bottomed out. But then they're like, well, I guess I got to go out and play. But they take the technology out with them, and they create these amazing shows with their, you know, that, and I think that's great. I think this is a great time to experience that.
Yeah, I was going to ask how necessary that physical experience is, and clearly it is. I mean, when we got the CD or whatever, the MP3 player, people still went out to see music. But it does raise another interesting question, which is, how do we use technology? Are the parameters the same? Or, right, going back to the necessity for live performance, are we trying to recreate what we do in the studio, or is it a whole nother thing completely?
I think it can be, again, and there's like lots of options here, because I know, so an example that that I would use is that Lagunitas is a microbeer brewery, and they recently just had an ad in an art publication, and it was a black and white ad, and it just had very little art in it at all. It had like one of their icons in it, and it said, "We're hoping you'll color this, or not. It's up to you. There's nothing in it for you, right?" And it's like, or maybe there is. Oh, forget we said that, and it was some clever copy, and then there was like hashtag Lagunitas something. So basically it was an invitation to do something with this ad, and then send it in, and then sure enough, there's an online portfolio, and it's like the crazy stuff people did with this. And I feel like that's a really great example of, this mashup that's happening right now, like somebody taking a printed piece, adding their own some sort of art to it, photographing it, putting it up online, everybody sharing it, commenting, high fives all around. I mean, it's pretty cool. And then just really quickly, I was at a music festival this last weekend, and at the music festival, they had artists that were creating pieces of art over the weekend, and then they did an auction at the end, and you could get a painting, and now that painting's hanging in my office, and I'm like, I have a client that would love this style, and it's art technology soup.
Yeah, that's.
It's great. It's great. Yay, art.
Can we talk a little bit more about how people are discovering art? So we've been talking a little bit about sort of online, but is there anything that's kind of been screaming us in the face this last few years in terms of how we're accessing this and how people are actually now discovering it? Is it all online? Does your friend still give you a piece of paper with somebody's name, or do you get handed a mixed CD? I don't know. But how are people discovering new works?
Well, I know Nike's social agency, that's not us, but they actually went through Instagram, and they decided that rather than trying to send artists out to all of these events that are happening all across the country and the world, that they would find artists that were already shooting those locations because they knew them intimately. And they called them up, like literally, and said, hey, like when Nike's in town or we've got an event going on, would you go out and shoot it? And so this whole, group of people that were just, taking pictures and posting them to Instagram because they loved it are now, I don't know how gainfully employed they are by Nike, but their hobby is turned into something now that they can make a few extra bucks with, and I think that's a really great example of how brands are finding people, and then I think there is a lot that happens online, but I think there's also there's still this really great human thing that happens that I think comes with a lot more credibility.
I think it's super interesting. I was at the CNN Democratic debates doing some behind-the-scenes work last Tuesday, and one of the things they did is one of their major social marketing campaigns was they brought really high trending Instagram personalities out to the debate before the debate happened, and that was where their Instagram coverage came from. So they basically brought people out that were influencing the communities on Instagram that they wanted to market to, and they called them all up and said, hey, would you like to come to the debate and shoot some photos and put them on Instagram? All those people were pretty excited about that. That's a pretty good plug, and really it kind of opened my eyes up to the idea that even large companies now are viewing content and viewing the internet the way that we do. You know, that looking through these platforms that we're on all the time and searching out what's special to us. And a lot of companies are actually doing that, you know, on a broader scale, looking through content that's out there like Nike and saying, we support this. This is in line with our brand values. And without having to go through the really long, arduous process of, you know, meeting with agents and talking, you know, it's like some of the things that happen when you're talking to higher end, you know, art makers and other people like that. Even myself, you know, to schedule me to shoot some photographs for Instagram takes time and money, and it's so that I can, you know, protect myself and my interests. But when you're looking to break into that field and you have strong work and you don't have you know, a history or a lot of experience, now the way that the internet works, it's really opening creativity up for a lot of people that have the skills and the talent, but maybe don't have representation or don't have access to some of the areas that they would be noticed, or live in a, you know, part of the country that's just not conducive to having a First Thursday or any of those type of things.
I'm interested in knowing, why is it important for industry to put together and invest all this money to create these events and to bring these artists together? I think one of the best examples is Red Bull. It always blows my mind. A little while ago I was involved in a project where they put together this kind of amazing event, and I worked on some like interactive, an interactive component of it. But taking a step back from the project, and I was just kind of looking at the scale of this thing for this 2-day event that really, I mean, it had their name on it, but they were bringing together these incredible artists, musicians, dancers, technologists. And yeah, that question was in the back of my head the whole time, is sort of, why is it so important for a drink company to put together this type of cultural event?
I think it creates, realistically it creates loyalty. And also realistically, it's, if you make the conscious decision to be a brand that values things within a community, that community tends to respond really positively to you. Skateboarding is like one of my personal hobbies and passions, and it's incredibly exclusive. Skateboarders are very much like a club, you know, and they don't like Nike being in their industry, and they don't like these different things. And the difference is with someone like Nike is that they made the effort to assimilate with the culture and to really pay attention and pay some money to those people. Because I think that when you're looking at large subgenres and things like that, you know, you really have to invest some money to get not just loyalty but trust from those people. And I think Red Bull's amazing at that in my mind. That where, I mean, another thing, their miniature skateboarding is a thing, and so it's fingerboarding, and there's no money in it. It's like 13-year-olds and me and like 4 other guys my age, and so there's no money whatsoever. And Red Bull sponsors events because one of the leading fingerboarding companies is a German company that they're just friends with. They formed a friendship and they build these big, massive miniature skate parks. And Red Bull sponsors events for them and gives them product and sponsors people within the fingerboarding community just because they like it, because they think it strengthens their brand message with the skateboarding community and with the people who are core buyers of their product.
There's obviously a crossover between that. But and sometimes it's just to celebrate something and create community.
Yeah, and experience, and art has always been about experience, and brands recognize that, and people at the end of the day like to be entertained, and they like to have beautiful things to look at and challenging things to think about, and they've got a lot of money. They can you know, spread it around a little bit and make sure everybody's, you know, part of that.
Another question I wanted to bring up, just because about 20 seconds ago I realized I heard I guess it's the 3D printer right behind me, and I know that sound. I guess
Making a life-size model of you.
Yeah. I guess
It'll be done when we're done.
we're getting to that point now where there are certain sounds that you learn to recognize just from experiencing them your whole life, and I was like, is that? And I turned as you were talking, and I realized that there was a 3D printer right behind my ear, and which is great. And it leads me to another question, which is, it seems that a lot of times we consider technology as a tool that enables us, or a mechanism that enables us to create art and to do new things and to push those limits of where we can be expressive and where we can create. And then we get these things, which are really interesting devices to use as an artist. Every student in our music technology program at CalArts learns how to design and make a printed circuit and how to then use a 3D printer. And certainly in art, this idea of fabrication has been something, that has always been an element there, whether that's a team of people that are making your painting for you or hiring an engineer to actually produce a work of art. And I'm just interested in getting your thoughts and the validity and what that means today, when a lot of times you have an artist who doesn't send the thing to be printed himself, comes up with an idea and sends that off to an engineer who then creates the 3D model and then sends that to get printed, or works with a fabrication shop. And I'm interested in sort of the details there.
It's actually an interesting question. I don't know if I have an answer, but I think that if you look like at music in the past, a lot of times the people that performed it didn't write it. That was back when you had the big songwriting culture. So maybe there's some benefit if we brought.
Yeah, there's 4 guys in the Netherlands that have actually written all of
That's right.
pop music
All pop
over
music.
the last 25 years.
I was blown away. My first job when I was in school was to do underdrawings for an artist. So I would reference everything and I would get the structures there, and it was like I had no idea. I thought artists walked up to canvases and just painted out of their head, and I think collaboration now and the ability to sort of, again, not to keep beating the same drum, but the ability to sort of pick and choose and find the exact right medium and the exact right tools to do something. I think that collaborative process, I guess if one of those people in that chain were to stand up and say, this is mine, I did this, then you'd be like, boo, bad, bad you. But I think if everybody's, I think there's so much happening collaboratively right now that it'd be a shame. I think it's great. I think it's awesome to open that up. I think, from my perspective, especially from the agency side, we have copywriters and we have designers and we have programmers and we have illustrators and photographers, and it's all a big group process. It makes it, and then you add technology in where it's run this and take care of all these little things that I don't really want to have to think about. That's even icing on the cake.
The collaboration is amazing. What you can do now, who you can create with. That's.
And when you think about the technology sort of as that connective tissue that allows you to do that too, even the fact that we can send files back and forth, can you imagine carrying your Cleigh tablet, it just, you couldn't do it, and now it's you can zip files back and forth, and it's it enables a lot of collaboration that otherwise would be really, really tough,
And perhaps between artists and engineers. It's not something that's new necessarily. In 1967, there was experiments in art and technology, which brought together people like John Cage with Bell Labs and a lot of other choreographers to basically take scientists and artists and to see what happens when you smash them together. And LACMA had a similar program around that time that ran until I think 71 or 72, which coincidentally they reopened last year. Last December they created proposals for the Art and Technology Lab again for the first time. And there's some really interesting proposals that came out of that. And again, that's the idea that you take classically trained artists and pair compare them with technology companies. So I think the LACMA thing has Tesla involved, or SpaceX, and some other very interesting companies. But at the same time, there's this other type of idea. I remember, I think it was 2009, I was at a conference at UC Santa Barbara, and a woman named Rebecca Allen, who teaches, I think, media design at UCLA. At the time, she was also the head of Nokia Research Labs, and she worked as a 3D, as like a pioneer in 3D graphics in the 80s. I think she worked with Kraftwerk on one of their first 3D videos. And I remember being really inspired by a talk that she gave where she talked about the need to actually create what she called the hybrid individual, which made me feel like a fuel-efficient car. And essentially that, she was saying the old model was you would take the artist and the engineer and put them in a room, or put them in a room with a product designer and try and create something useful, something meaningful, an experience or a product. And there's this new model now where you're trying to create these people that actually can operate in both worlds. So, I mean, I see it every day because I teach students how to program, but we're also talking about aesthetics at the same time. And yeah, I'm interested in knowing, was the old model of taking that engineer and artist and putting them in a room together, was it really that broken? Or what is the difference? Why do we want to create these individuals that are highly versed in the technical aspects, that can create their own systems, that know computer science or engineering, that can operate a 3D printer, but also is it necessary for them to be the artist as well?
I think coming from an industry that's largely collaborative, almost to the point of suffocating collaboration. In the case of a lot of shooting, it's like you get a job and you're the gaffer, and so you touch the lights and that's all you do. And if anybody tells you to touch anything that's not a light, you tell them to get out of the business. Like there's a lot of like separation in the old school mentality like that. And what technology's allowed me to do is I basically carry around on my back one camera film set. I can do my DITing, I can do all of my post-production out of my laptop in the front and my camera in the back, tripod on that. So it's like, I think that one of the things is it's really just another form of medium, another form of choice. It's like this idea that like, for a really huge production, you do need a lot of people to pitch in and to carry gear and to somebody always to be looking at the lights so nobody knocks them over and breaks them. And you want your camera person only paying attention to camera, and the director can handle talent and all of those things when you're on this big scale. But then when you try to scale that down to a small commercial shoot and you're just trying to do an instructional video or a product hype video, do you really need that extra baggage, and do you really need those extra people and those extra opinions for something that's pretty simple? And so I think it really creates it's kind of divisive. There's a lot of people that say, it's forcing out collaboration and that's a bad thing, but I think that if you're hungry for collaboration, you'll always find it. And what some of this technology is allowing us to do is say, if I want to be Stanley Kubrick and have my really specific opinion and only have it done my way, maybe it's better for me to work in a little bit of a vacuum, to kind of have that stuff to myself and be able to control everything and do everything myself.
And that's maybe always been one of the challenges in art is, like you're saying, at a certain scale, things require more than one person. So, and certainly, even if you're specialized in and well-versed in many areas of technology or art, there will certainly be cases where you always need to collaborate with people.
I think just a quick example when we were in school. When I was in school, I felt like understanding the process by which my art would finally be produced made me a better artist. And I think to the extent that artists today have technology at their disposal to understand that art, to be able to think on both sides of it, just means that you have control over that process and you know that the end result is going to be what you set out for. So I think my thought when you were talking about should we mash those two people up in the room, or should we be able to think in both ways, I think that there's probably a growing need to have some basic understanding of technology in order to be an effective anything.
Even to just communicate.
Yeah, to communicate. But I think as an artist, if you're really serious about your craft, then you're gonna learn what you need to know about technology so you can best apply that for the best end result.
Thank you. I think we're going to open up for a QA now. So, if anybody has questions?
So we've been live streaming the event, and somebody on the live stream Q&A asked, what technologies are newly available that artists can leverage? Internet of Things, Illustrator, SaaS tools, as random examples. What kind of tools are out there?
I think one that's obviously getting really popular right now is VR and also AR, so virtual reality and augmented reality. The fact that you can hold your phone in front of an environment now and augment that environment with recognition. These things that used to be at a university someplace in machine learning or AI department are now actually quite accessible tools for doing amazing things. And I'm particularly interested in where the art community starts to use those tools. And there's a lot of different areas where you can use that, whether that's in terms of pure information, archival purposes, but also creating new works of art. I think a lot of people saw Google's Deep Dream, I think it was called, which is using what are called convolutional neural networks. And they were using that in a weird way to kind of synthesize new images. And it's amazing that that's coming out of Google, but I want to see what happens when that's coming out of the more of the art community as well. Because I think we have access to these amazingly powerful tools now, and if we fully embrace it, there's some really interesting things. So for me, using any kind of recognition, whether that's machine learning or other kinds of virtual reality, AR, I think there's a lot of interesting areas to explore there.
I think it's been around for a long time, but I think that high power portable computing is really the thing that's, to me, what's gonna make my life easier as an artist. What I look at, you know, I'm always looking at the next thing that, I mean, phones are really powerful tools now. I mean, I've got, like, it's funny, but I'm a shooter and I've got a lens for my phone, you know? Like, I carry this thing around because it's like, it gives me a different perspective on things. If I want to make my Instagram photo that much cooler or that memory that much more in line, I don't have to build up my camera. You know, it's like it takes a minute to get that thing going. It's heavy. It takes a lot of information every time I shoot a photo. If I want a snapshot for myself, I tend to use my phone. And I also tend to use Photoshop on my phone because I'm a freak and I can't have a picture that I don't edit afterwards. So it's like, you know.
Photoshop. That to answer that question from the person, it sounds so old and obvious, but like if you're an artist, Photoshop, get it.
Or if you just want to make GIFs.
Yeah, right, exactly. Actually, one of the things I'm kind of curious, there's a lot of tools online right now that I'm just know enough about programming to be totally ridiculously dangerous. But there's a lot of online tools now where where you can dabble in creating websites and things like that. And there's oh shoot, I'm gonna forget it. I'll think of it before the end for that online person. But there's a tool that's free. You can go and build websites. It's pretty awesome.
More questions?
Hi. You mentioned earlier about what was it? The hybrid, somebody developing two sets of skills. In your work environment, what do you guys prefer? Do you guys want somebody who has multiple set of skills, or like one person who's like actually professional in their skills? Because like the trend is like everybody wants somebody who could do everything, but when it comes to actual skills, they can't be professional.
I want to have people do what they want to do. Like our best creative people are people that are doing what they love. And so if that's one thing really well, great. And if it's multiple things, I think it's really tough to be I think having some ability to shift and be a little general when you need to be is going to be a big benefit. And maybe it's just that you should continue to learn, so be a specialist, but be open. I think would be my advice, at least in my world. That's important.
I would agree that it's good to have somebody that does have their strengths, but these other auxiliary skills, and I would say to definitely to like a working level, is super important. I think it's pretty hard to exist in this world and not have that. Just be just this.
Plus,
And
by
it
the time
happens.
you specialize in something, it may be obsolete in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm a really bad example for that because I literally have 3 positions that I do as one person: cinematography, photography, and editing of both. And I think that I've always had those passions, and I think that's the big difference. Kind of like Dee was saying, that realistically, people are going to be who they are, and I think that people who are strong in one skill often have subset skills that relate to those skills, or interests that can feed into that. Like I said, I went to college for graphic design and assisted a photographer because that was my passion. I'm now a cinematographer that does photography on the side, pretty much. I've kind of gone through a range of activities, but that's mostly because those interested me. And I would say I do have a specialty, but at the same time, I would classify myself as like a skilled professional in all 3. So I think it's important to have diverse skills, and especially my industry is kind of a little bit different because I think in the near future you're going to need to be 2 things. Most still photographers are shooting video on their stills cameras. Most video people, especially now with Red and other 4K cameras, are pulling usable print quality stills from their motion footage. So I think that with technology advancing in my specific industry, you almost need a knowledge of both. Though I do think that you are on base with the fact that having a specialty is pretty important. I think that having something to kind of to set your hat on, to say that like, if you put me in a room with 5 other people that do this, I'm gonna be at least in the top tier. I think that's definitely.
It's a really valid and important question to ask, though. I know over the last probably 5 or 6 years, the idea that we have so many resources online that we can really hack something together pretty. It's pretty easy to hack something together, whether or not you are very invested in computer science and the difference between a functional programming language and an object-oriented programming language, and how do you communicate the same idea in both, and all of these things that if you become obsessive about something highly technical and highly specialized, you can achieve that. And I've read a lot of interesting articles specifically about the creative coding space, and where that bleeds into design and the sort of the gotchas that you want to watch out for when hiring, especially because people can be quite generalists when there's something wrong with the front end on your site, or you having there's some sort of capacity issue. You probably want somebody who's a specialist in fixing that issue that's being displayed to the user, or somebody that understands how to optimize database queries so that you don't have scaling issues as your user base grows or something like that. I don't know, I'm just making something up. But I do think that there is a real potential, and I see it in students all the time now. Students that come in as that want to learn electronic music production or engineering, and they get opened up to this other world, of whether that's fabrication or software engineering. And when they make that leap into that world, which gives them a very marketable skill that they can actually get a job after art school, which is something that is also a real problem. There's a certain viewpoint that they bring to it, which has always been what's the word I'm looking for? Celebrated in the arts, which is thinking outside the box, which is bringing a unique approach to problem solving and knowing when and what questions to ask. I remember when I did my doctorate in New Zealand. I was in the music school, but working with the engineering school. And I remember talking to the head of engineering there, and he was saying the biggest issue that he has with traditional engineers is they can come up with the cheapest way to build something, and it'll look, klooched together and it'll work, but they didn't necessarily know how to ask the question of what they needed to actually build when the client came up to them and told them that they needed this thing. And that's always been the thing that the artist understands, because the artist is looking out into the world and trying to figure out what questions to ask. So I do think there is a danger in the oversimplification and generalization that happens as a result of being able to, on a high level, kind of dabble in all of these different areas. But when you, like anything else, when you put in the time, and if you really do invest in it, I've seen amazing innovation come from artists, technical innovation come from artists, and I think that perspective is really beneficial, especially in engineering and computer science. But like anything else, it just takes time and focus and putting in the energy. Yeah.
Have you had any experience attracting or inspiring or working with young children in these fields, and what are the obstacles and the benefits to starting early? And I'm really talking about K-12.
I think it's a really interesting one. Somebody forwarded me a link. Do you guys know the website Quora, I think it's called? It's an online forum. And there's like an 8-year-old kid who posted on there, "I don't know programming yet, and I want to work at Google. Is my life over?" And it's like, no, relax, your life's not over, you have plenty of time. But it is something that is interesting to ask. When we did our first online course, which was a programming course, but in a language where you're programming and writing music software, it's a music-based programming language. I think there was a 12-year-old kid who took that course and actually passed and did well in that course when they had the opportunity to take their time and do that. And I think that there's an amazing potential there to open up to this whole other community of intelligent, bright people that can really push themselves in amazing ways if they're given the opportunity. So yeah, I think it's happening whether or not we are making an effort to do that. And I think there are a lot of, especially with online, I'm personally interested in online education, the MOOC space and that whole thing. And I think that there's amazing potential there.
I think we in particular with the music, we work with different entities, different individuals that reach out to schools to teach them how to, well, basically it's experiencing the joy of making music. One of the biggest hurdles is a lot of times just access to the instruments. In our case would be the software and the hardware. But to get out there and allow them to experience that. And the one thing is to learn about making the music that they also listen to. Not that you want to push away, the classics and the great, great pieces of music that we study, but you see it opens up doors, their mind and to the whole idea of making music and the creative process. That's something that for us is a very important area of focus.
Yeah, I think absolutely we need tinkerers and we need people testing this technology, and so much of it is intuitive that I think it works really well for K through 12. And I think there's blogs out there that are that are being filled with content from kids that are pre-written, pre-writing. And with dictation and all these things, and then also I think brands again. I worry a little when I talk about brands too much, because it feels a little like paid paid advertising. But I do think that they're also very open and interested in K through 12 and exposing them to art and different art forms. And then, you know, for us as an agency, we've experienced firsthand with some of the events that we've done where we had portfolio reviews with art directors from major publications, and we had a high school teacher bring all of her senior, and we did it for skateboards, and they actually made their own skate deck. So they didn't just do the graphics and the design, but they actually built the skateboards, which involved math, and that multidisciplinary learning is all about, I think, you know, design thinking is where things are going. So I think it's happening earlier because because technology in some ways has enabled that. And yeah, I hope it goes, and I think, you know, we should all be open to that.
And yeah, to further that, I think especially in the online space, it sort of makes it all possible again. If we think about it in large, you know, the US is really based around STEM education, which is what science, technology, engineering, and math. And I think it was John Maeda, who's a designer, used to be president at RISD. And I remember I think it might have been a TED Talk or something, but he's telling this anecdote of when he was a child, and his father, who was like a real working class guy, went to his school for his parent-teacher conference, and the teacher sits down with his father and says, "Oh, John is really great at math and art." And then the next day, John is at the grocery store with his dad or someplace, I can't remember, and he bumps into somebody, and he goes, "Oh, how did the parent-teacher conference go?" And his father answers, "Oh, it went really well. John is really good at math." And there has been enlarged, you know, as budgets continue to get cut, art education is something that has sort of been disappearing for a long time. It's not a new thing. But John Maeda specifically, and some other people have been kind of pushing to what they call STEAM education, which is essentially bringing arts back into it. And I think, you know, especially in K through 12, I mean, even in higher education, but especially in K through 12, the money is just not necessarily there anymore. I don't know if it's getting any better, but there's new potentials with online platforms where it can be completely free or you know, very cheap to have access to this information and to bring it to somebody's house in a way that is unprecedented. And so I think technology is having a huge impact there.
Yeah, bring art via technology.
Yeah, I think it's super important too. Like for me personally, I was really lucky and I was encouraged to be artistic by my family all growing up, and most of the foundational skills that I use in my job now, I have because I refused to go to my classes that weren't art classes in high school. It's like really the truth. I was not very good. Like the educational system wasn't super effective for me personally, but the part that I got every bit of joy and every bit of knowledge that I still use to this day were my photography and video classes. Like it really is. I think it can't be overemphasized how important the fundamental knowledge of that stuff is when you're at that age, especially for people who are different. I mean, for people who think differently, who think creatively, and who, you know, maybe have a hard time sitting through a lecture, or, you know, have a hard time with an assignment that doesn't pique their interest at all, you know? And a lot of those people, when you're looking at learning differently, a lot of those people respond really well to art and can get things. I mean, I got things that are more foundational learning that I got from like my art classes that I just didn't pay attention to in my
There's a great program. It's called Artworks LA, and they teach the arts, and a lot of these kids that go to Artworks LA are kids that, you know, were at risk of not finishing school because the system just isn't working for them. They learn in a different way. And last year we went to this ceremony where they had some of the kids talk, and it was truly inspiring because it totally changed their life through art. And they actually had planned out what they wanted to do. One of them wanted to go to Cal Arts. That got up and gave a speech and said, and hopefully in 2 years I'm going to go to Cal Arts. From somebody that wasn't going to school at all. So I think
I think I know who that is.
Do you? Yeah?
He's going to Cal Arts, right? He's been on, was it Benjamin?
Yeah.
Nick Bradley? Yeah, he's been on like all the Kadenze classes, just like, he's amazing. Yeah, really, really interesting.
It was truly inspirational thing. So that's a great, there's a lot of, we encounter a lot of those programs around the country, well, actually around the world, but I would say there's a lot here in the U.S. to check out.
Especially here in LA.
Yeah.
I know there's also Young Producers Group.
YPG. Yep. It's another great program, which is outreach to the schools to provide arts where they wouldn't have music.
There's also something that's very interesting that I've seen happen. I mean, every year I see it with students that come in when we throw some pretty intense, whether it's music, signal processing, or it's pretty mathy and intense engineering sometimes, to a room that's full of people that want to make beats or come from a classical music background, or a designer from the design school that's interested in interactivity. And I think there's a real problem with the way we teach, especially math and science here in the U.S. and outside the U.S. as well. Brett Victor, who is a guy who was at Apple for a long time, also worked with a lot of music companies like Alesis, who I think has always done it. Every time I see a talk of his, my brain is just like on the side. Just like, and one of the things he talks about is the problem with how we teach math and science. We give somebody a piece of paper and we tell them to multiply these numbers together 100 times and to come up with some trick on their hands to learn order of operations or how to put these things together. But through technology, we are afforded this opportunity to come up with new ways to visualize these concepts. And I think combining or embedding that within arts practice, where you can put your hand on a knob and you can turn the knob and you can hear the pitch go up and you can then talk about that. Or you can open up this filter, or you can do any of these processes where you can either tangibly grab it, or you can see or hear it and get all of the other sensory modalities involved. And I think the opportunity then to teach kind of math and science actually opens up, and I see it every year with students that come into art school, and all of a sudden they're teaching themselves, they're going back and learning linear algebra and calculus, and they have an application all of a sudden, and this whole world opens up to them, they see it in another way. So I also think it's, we should be looking at how we can use technology to visualize and simplify and sonify these concepts, which they tend to be a little too abstract when we're, in high school and just trying to figure out what we're going to eat for lunch and if I can get the car on the weekend or whatever. Yeah.
A big trend that's going on now with web and all software really is user experience, and kind of coming out of IDEO's approach to design, where you look at the problems that the users are experiencing, and then you try to use tools that create or use tools that exist to respond to that. And a lot of what I've seen in technology and art is a lot of times the technologists are building tools that are really only comprehensible to the other technical people, and a lot of times the artistic process is not really looked at by the people who are creating the tools. So especially with computer music, a lot of the stuff is just completely incomprehensible to the classically trained musicians. And Ableton has really made leaps and bounds in kind of advancing some existing tools from, and so I wonder kind of like how each of you deal with creating a better mousetrap versus making a new instrument and then trying to get people to adopt it, and how to get across a new instrument to people so that they can do something fun with it.
Well, with regards to how we do it is kind of refer back to what I said earlier. We really spend a lot of time listening and learning how people that use our products use them, and we do have a team that actually does that. They study the interaction with the UI, and we look at we ask a lot of questions and want to find out what people want to achieve, or if there's something that we might observe, we might ask a question. A lot of it's just here, sit down with this, and we'll video them, and we might ask some questions afterwards. We'll take diligent notes on that, and then really try to figure out for the person that's actually using it, instead of building something else for somebody that's not using it. So I think that's maybe that's simple, but I think to me it seems kind of like common sense to a degree, but
I think it's interesting because it's a unique approach. Red actually does a really similar thing called Red User, which is basically a large forum of people who use the camera, and the higher ups of our company are constantly on there responding, looking at questions, realizing where sticky points are, in the workflow, all these different things. And I think what's really interesting about that is it's kind of a dawn of a really honest UX. It's this idea that you don't have to trick anybody or use as much psychology as we currently do. I think if you just ask people what they like to do, and you are sampling a large enough audience, and that audience is made up of people who actually impact your brand. That's another really important part. So it's if you're really asking the right people, maybe we don't have to play so much, eye tracking and all of those different things. Maybe we can really just ask people. And if we're doing it in a friendly way, in a way that's mutual, maybe why couldn't crowdsourcing be, the answer to a lot of these UX problems?
It's a really an interesting thing is happening in the advertising space right now. We're an advertising agency, but one of our clients right now is an engineering firm, and we're not so much doing advertising with them as working with them to create great experiences for their customers in things like online tools that calculate rebates from government incentives. So I don't know, that's not exactly advertising, but in a sense it is, because that's their business and they need to be good at it. And we're trained to be design critics. Everything we do is so beautiful now, and everything we see, and your toilet bowl brush has been very well thought out. And so being able to work with clients to create these user interfaces and these user experiences, even for highly technical, highly engineered, and sometimes it's only other engineers that are going to see it, and that matters, So I think companies like Red and Ableton, are good examples of companies that take that role of user experience very seriously, and then there's a lot of support. There's a lot of support organizations, even marketing and advertising, that are also working to make those experiences really amazing.
Quite often too, when people we internally have a thread that you can choose whether to be a part of it or not, but I would say probably 2/3, maybe even more of the company is a part of it, and it's a wish list, and including Gerhard. And so, for example, if you walked up to me and you said, I really wish that I could do this, blah 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 blah, and we might have a conversation about it, and then I try to figure out how to boil that down to a sentence and circulate that. And the other benefit, well, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, but the other benefit is that a lot of the people that work at Ableton are passionate about making music. It's either they're aspiring artists, or it's a serious hobby for them, and that brain trust will often then throw in feedback, and that'd be really great, or you could do this, and so on and so forth. So that's another way that we take ideas from our from the people that use it, along with forums too, because the forum,
I think there's a trap with technology where you can, if we have the Oculus Rift now, I could put that on my head, and maybe I can have some new interaction, whether that's to edit a photo or to compose music. And then I can throw off the Oculus and I can go put on some accelerometers on my hands and I can start moving around and dancing and potentially map it to the same parameters or some other parameters. And maybe it's a rewarding experience, maybe it's not. And I'm gonna try and make a cohesive point here, because when you asked that question, my brain just went in a million directions. But I think there's a couple things that you need to be really conscious of. The first one is not just how we can do this, but why. And it's the first thing I ask when a student tells me they want to build something or they have an idea for an installation. And it seems so obvious and silly, but really why are you using that sensor? And at what point does the sensor disappear? And that's really the goal always, to make the interface disappear so that the thing really does become an extension of you. And that doesn't mean that it needs to be overly simplified to the point where you don't have to put into it. I do think you need to put something into it. And if all we ever had was one button, there are issues with that. And until AI or whatever gets so good that our body sensors are just reading our alpha waves or whatever and making those decisions for us. But I think we're a long way off from there, even with some of the amazing technology that we have. So I think as long as we're consciously, as technologists, consciously making sure that we're adding and striving for exploration and nuance in whatever we're building, while trying to make something accessible, make the experience, make that level of entry. The level of entry needs to in a way be low, but the possibility of going to more depth needs to be high, and it's a huge challenge. And I think if you're really paying attention to that, you're asking why along the way, and then you spend time with it after the fact. There's no point in creating something necessarily, unless it's for aesthetic reasons, and then throwing it out. There's a whole nother conversation there, but reflecting, going back and then saying, okay, you know what, that was a really good idea, and the other idea was a really crappy idea and did not work, and okay, let's get past that. And I'm hopeful.
And technology lets us iterate a lot. That's the new buzzword, is like, that's what's really cool, is that technology allows us to, constantly be improving without having to, we can do it fairly rapidly, and that's exciting.
All of my Android friends that use Android and not iPhone, and I think Android is great, but
I was thinking like your Android robot.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny because we do have a robotic orchestra. But all of my friends that are very invested in sort of the Android mobile camp, when we got Force Touch recently on iPhones, they're like, oh yeah, we had that for 2 years, and I had a 13 megapixel camera on my Galaxy, whatever, last year. And Apple has always sort of sat in the back and then sort of reflected on what people are actually using and how they're using it, and then they come out with a better implementation, a more reliable implementation. Right? Touchscreens, Bill Buxton was working with multi-touch in the mid-'80s. And there's a lot of amazing HCI work if you're into human-computer interaction. And it dates back all the way to the 80s, where we were already working on these devices. And even in 2009, I was working a research job at Nokia, and I had this amazing phone called the N900, which had a touchscreen, it had a stylus, it ran Linux. The thing was a beast. There was this amazing little computer in my pocket, and they couldn't sell them. And even the developer community that they thought would appeal to the developer community didn't really pick up on this amazing device that was quite powerful. It was a little tablet the size of a phone in your pocket. They were too early, and there's a time component with anything where the timing needs to be right for adoption and that sort of thing. And I think, like you're saying, you have to pay attention to the people who are using the technology. You can't just create technology for technology's sake. It needs to fulfill some purpose. And there's nobody that's going to tell you that than the people in front of you. So I think it's really important to be aware of that as you're working on these types of things.
Hi, I think I'll be the last question for today. I know that's about to wrap up, but I see that Red brought a Red camera, and I was just curious if you brought any like example footage that you were gonna maybe you can share with us.
Yeah, if you guys want, we have, so we do this series called The Red Collective, and basically we look at and highlight people who use our camera that are doing things that we find interesting or that we want to push creatively. And so I brought one that I personally worked on, and it was a really, really amazing shoot. And this guy, Ivan, he is a really amazing creative guy, and he's an incredible people person. And one of the skills he has is that he is really disarming in a great way. And he walks up to people, and so in this video you'll see he's meeting some of these cowboy families in northern Nevada for the first time. And he just walks up in a hearty handshake, and he's funny looking guy, beard, and he's kind of hippie looking, and so he's walking up to these kind of gruff guys and just right away melting at how personable he is and just what an awesome guy is. And then on top of it, you can see all of those characteristics in his work. He does really beautiful portraiture of these like cowhands and people that are like really salt to the earth sort of people, and it comes like his love for human creativity and for human spirit really comes through. So I brought that if we want to play it.
Oh, it's on the TV.
It wasn't just the camera, right? It was the story behind it. It was the fuck you to the industry. It was the fuck you to the gatekeepers. And that's when that fire started coming back into my belly. Because I had lost that fire. Lost it. Saw what could be, that completely uprooted everything. You know, at that point I quit my job, sold my house, liquidated all my savings, and dove in. Royal Life Media, by design, we are a small company. There's 3 partners, and we specialize in corporate documentaries. Early on, we made the decision that it was just going to be the 3 of us. You know, we decided to keep lean and mean, and the reason we could do that, quite frankly, was because of the Red. And I've been on the other side of it, you know, sitting in the cubicle and, you know, driving to meetings, a tie around my neck. That's a whole world I just don't want to have involvement in anymore. And so going out to film and to take photographs and portraits of these guys and women that are doing kind of this work that no one really knows about, that's something I've always wanted to do. It's allowed me to discover things now. It's allowed me to see things that I otherwise wouldn't have seen. It's given me a different perspective on a lot of things. People overthink the creative process. If you just kind of go with your gut, I think that's creative in itself. If someone interesting walks by, there's something about them that I lock in on. I want to capture that moment. It's allowed me to really recognize people, not only as individuals, but collectively. We're all the same. We're the same alien on this planet trying to figure shit out. And everyone's trying to figure out their own way. It's a very short existence. We all know it's a short existence. But in saying that, it is a really beautiful existence. I think we're all trying to make our mark, right? That's what you should be doing. It's why you were put here. My name is Ivan Ackerton, and I'm a motion and stills photographer, and I'm one of 3 partners with Royal Galactic Media. That's the one thing I think I'm good at. I'm very good at anything else, really, but I can take a picture.
Speaking of technology, you'll have to excuse it being a little shaky there. At red.com or Shot on Red is our YouTube channel. You can view that one, and there's a bunch more of them. We've got like 9 out right now, and the 10th is coming out soon. I would encourage you, if you get a chance, the 10th collective will be coming out in probably a week and a half or so, and it's really cool. It's this guy, Mark Toya, and he used to be a painter. And so I was really bummed that we couldn't finish it in time to bring it for this, because he used to be a painter, and one of the main things is he does all these elaborate sketches, and then he uses his camera to make the painting, which I thought was really, really amazing. Like, and he does commercial work for Lexus and all these different people, but his whole background is just strictly creative, fine art, and he's taken that and kind of turned it because he got so fascinated with the camera and the high return. So if you paint or you do any long form art, the idea that you could finish it in a couple seconds is like pretty appealing. I think it is to me, anyways. And so if you get a chance, I would encourage anybody to check that out, because he's a really interesting guy and some real beautiful imagery over in New Zealand. Thank you very much.
Thank you everybody for coming. There's refreshments at the cafe. You have to buy them, but they're there. And thank you to our panelists and our friends that helped put this together. Everybody for coming out. Have a good evening.
Yeah,